the wood mulch.
Mhm.
You have to pull it back from the trunk for the winter so the rodents aren't near the trunk. We'll whitewash, the bottom of the trees for sun scald. You can add grit. It's just like crushed up pumice or limestone.
Supposed to make the little, like, the rodent teeth go like the grit?
Exactly. Does that actually work? Or has it just been that we had a problem since we started doing that, so we think it's been working?
This is Serious Grower Podcast. I'm Anna. I'm an entomologist. I'm a scientist, and I'm using this podcast to talk to all kinds of growers and eaters who are serious about their farms, their gardens, their local food systems. And I'm asking, how can science help? Today's co-host is Casey. She's an experienced market farmer, having grown in Northern California and now in the Bitterroot Valley out in Western Montana. Her family is transitioning into non-commercial farming. She's a homesteader now. You'll be hearing plenty from her because her experience brings so many unique perspectives and because she's my best friend. What I didn't really think about before is that, like, you remember years and years ago when you and your husband wanted to start an apple orchard, and I said, you should go and ask Extension because they'll know what apple varieties that grow well in Montana. What I did not know is that you happen to live down the street from not only the Horticultural Research Center, but they have an apple project there. Like, they have a heritage apple project. I didn't know that.
They do. Yeah, we have a heritage apple project, which is awesome. And we didn't know that when we started either. Like you said, we went to the extension office, which is different than the research station. But
yeah,
then
still, like, the coincidence of that really got me, where I was like, oh, you know what you should do? You should go to extension. And, like, there just happened to be, like, the perfect resource for you right down the street.
Well, it was so funny because we ordered a couple apple varieties and planted them. And then it was like later that year, the same extension agent called us up and was like, hey, I know you have apples that came on your land. We want to test them and see what they are for the Heritage Apple Project, which is the first I heard about it after we ordered the apples. I found out after that, too, that most of the apples in the valley are Macintosh. They're all different types of Macintosh. And so that's why they were doing the Heritage Apple Project, to see what other apples did do good here. It's like such a monocrop of Macintosh. They're like, oh, there's 3 other types too. We got the results like 2 years later because, the lady left extension. It was another guy after that. And then the next guy after that then told us we have a Jonathan and we have a Wolf Point. I don't remember the third kind now, but I could find it again.
Did it match up to what you thought you had?
No, one of them we thought was this, like, must have been a heritage variety. It ripened late, but stayed good through really cold temperatures into November. And it had this like pearlescent sort of skin, great for storage, just kind of like a hardness to them. They didn't soften up. Well, turns out that one was actually just the rootstock. It was like a full, mature, like 80-year-old tree.
Oh, God, well, you're just a regular old Johnny Appleseed.
I guess so. Each new apple, and we'll come across them in our woods, like down in Cottonwoods. I'll be like, wow, there's an apple here I never knew about. And it'll taste so good. And I'm like, we found another heritage apple. And then, the first extension agent, we're friends now, Katrina, she'll come over and be like, it's a Macintosh. It's another Macintosh. Anyway, but yeah, she's one of my best friends now. And it was because of your advice of going to the extension office, tell them you want to be a farmer. And that's exactly what I did. And I kind of that with a southern accent too. I was like, we're going to be farmers now.
I really do think that, like, extension agents, like, they just sit in their office hoping somebody walks in and says, I want to be a farmer. Tell me how to do it.
She did. She was so excited. She spent like the next couple weeks on us. It was really great. And she gave us all sorts of packets and everything we ever could need to know. The first thing she had us do, I remember this too, was do a soil sample and then send that in to, what's the company that does it? They also do the blood testing. LabCorp.
Oh, your soil sample went to LabCorp?
Maybe I'm wrong about that. I was pregnant all at the same time. So it was just like lots of different sifting of samples and testings and things like that.
Every state does it a little bit differently. So, like, some states have their own testing facilities and they do their own testing, like Maine and Pennsylvania. New Hampshire did not. We used to send ours to Pennsylvania.
Ours wasn't in Montana. We had to send it out of
Yeah.
state somewhere. And then we got the results back. And I was like, wow, there's so much organic matter in my soil, more than I ever would have thought, because we never amended it, nothing. It was just like bare ground. Well, it turns out the organic matter was the runners from the quackgrass just shredded up into the soil sample. She read the results for us. She's like, wow, you have a lot of organic matter. Come to find out, that's what that was.
In hindsight, do you think he did a good job of sampling that plot? Like how
No, I just like straight up did the the soil auger into the soil, just all those quackgrass runners right into the soil.
And they were so ubiquitous that like you took a soil sample from like lots of different places and it still had a lot of quackgrass in it.
Yeah, everywhere had quackgrass runners. Every single bit. Anyway, turns out, yeah, we needed more actual organic matter and to deal with quackgrass. So what we did, and this was maybe a good thing, but we needed to revisit it, was we sheet mulched, just cardboard with wood chips on that. And then we didn't think about it much until probably about 5 years later. Those wood chips did break down a lot, but turns out they harbor rodents that just live under the sheet mulch, who then girdle the trunks of your trees in the winter. We should have pulled that wood mulch back every year instead of just leaving it there, like way back. We didn't do that.
Because like, what are the other options? I have been looking high and low for someone that does really good education on wildlife pest management. There's not a lot. In the olden days, like we would just teach people how to kill them. Like, oh, here's the best way to lay out bait in a way that doesn't impact like other stuff. You're just targeting the things that are below the trees. That's not great either. A lot of the baits that they reference in like the old recommendations are probably not available anymore because like you just can't put that stuff out nimbly bimbly.
Yeah, just straight up poison. Right. Well, so that was definitely a learning experience about the wood mulch, and you have to pull it back, way back from the trunk for the winter so that the rodents near the trunk. But I kind of wonder about this. What we've done, and we'll whitewash, the bottom of the trees for sun scald. We had read, and it might have been in the Holistic Orchard books, you can add grit, and it's just like crushed up. Is it pumice or limestone maybe? Or
no,
grit.
That gets supplied with the white paint. It's supposed to make the little, like the rodent teeth go like the grit.
Exactly. So that makes anything that wants to chew into it be like, oh, I'm chewing into gritty, rocky taste and I'm never going to do this again. Well, here's what I wonder is, does that actually work? Or has it just been that we haven't had a problem since we started doing that, so we think it's been working?
I think you have really hit the nail on the head when it comes to behavioral controls. Like how would you know? And so like that's why I'm really looking for an expert in this, because I have some colleagues in Virginia that have been looking at repellent sprays for deer. The way that they test it is that they like throw a bunch of pumpkins around the edge of the farm, like outside of the deer fence. And so they have multiple locations where they have pumpkins. Oh, and these deer, they love those pumpkins. They're so tasty. They spray some and don't spray others. It's a controlled experiment. And they're finding big differences. Like the deer don't touch the sprayed ones and they eat up the unsprayed ones. But they have plenty of unsprayed pumpkins to eat, right? So like what? Like unless they were really desperate and like came back later to get the sprayed pumpkins, like that's not the best test. So I don't know how to answer your question. I'm sure there's some research that said the rodents would prefer a plant that doesn't have paint or grit or whatever. But like if they were desperate, they're going to eat it, right?
Yeah, if they're desperate, I figure they would. And they just haven't been desperate ever since we've started using the grit, apparently. And then we started using the grit when we first planted those trees. We did the white interior vinyl paint, mixed in that grit, painted them. Well, we didn't do it every year. And so the year that the trees did get girdled, maybe we hadn't painted them for like 2 years. And so all that grit had kind of come off. It was still a little bit white. And then we realized, yeah, a lot of those trees had been girdled. Maybe it's because that grit had worn off. Now we've started our own old wives' tale, maybe.
So I've done some homework. I was trying to answer maybe 3 different questions. What kind of voles do you have where you are? Would it have made much of a difference had you done what you said you wish you had done, which is like all the mulch away from the trunks? Is there any evidence from the literature about grit in the paint? So like the paint mixed with, I found a paper where they did look at that and they mixed it 1-to-1 paint and sand.
Okay.
I will get to that because it's a very cute study. But first, I wanted to talk about voles a little bit.
Okay.
So I'm going to show you some pictures. These voles are unbearably cute.
Oh, I think they're pretty dang cute too. But then when you see them in the garden,
Jumping in here just to remind you that you can see some of the photos that Casey and I looked at on our Instagram at Serious Grower. Go over there, take a look, like and subscribe, leave a comment. Back to our conversation. The study I'm going to show you, they specifically looked at the prairie vole, which this does exist where you are in Montana, but there are a couple different species. I'm drawing a little bit of information from Voles of Montana, a document from the state of Montana. They say that there's 8 species of vole in Montana. However, only 4 of those species actually interact with humans in a way. One of them is this prairie vole. Another one is the meadow vole, which is a species that we do have where I am in New Hampshire, this eastern meadow vole. There is another species that we have in New England, which I don't think you have where you are, which is the woodland vole or the pine vole. The difference between this vole and the meadow vole is that they never go above ground. They call it a fossorial species, which means that during the summer it stays below ground, and then during the winter, if there's snow cover, it comes above ground, but it stays below the snow. A lot of the research that I was looking at was from USDA, and a lot of it is from Gary Whitmer. And I just wanted to show you a picture of Gary Whitmer just because I like to see the guy. Can you see him? He's holding a couple of rodents.
what's he holding? Like rats?
Yes, I believe those are rats. So he works with wildlife because most of the work in North America that has to do with rodent pests in outdoor situations was done by this guy.
Wow.
I felt like we should take a look at him.
Yeah, Gary Whitmer. He seems like he ought to have had a reality TV show, like Rat Hunter.
Right? Your assumption that like pulling the mulch away would help. And I think from what I read a few papers that were looking at how bad voles are in non-disturbed situations. So like no-till versus conventionally tilled stuff. And they definitely had worse voles where the soil was not disturbed. So that definitely confirms your assumption that that would have helped. But I found a paper that Gary Whitmer did. This was in New York State. So like this involved people from the USDA Wildlife Service in New York State. They had a landfill that they were trying to re-wild. So they were planting trees and they were getting nailed by voles. So they said, what can we do? They looked at a bunch of different things, but they found that the most effective thing was having like pea gravel around the plants. Here's what they found. The average percentage of damaged and dead seedlings by treatment: zinc phosphate, rodenticide, and then they were mowing or not mowing, and then some were surrounded by pea gravel. Pea gravel was significantly less damaged, but they were still, there was like 40% of the trees were damaged. So that's a good recommendation to make it less hospitable around the tree, but it still wouldn't solve the problem. Something I kept on reading over and over again is that all of the species have these kind of boom and bust cycles. They say like they'll have population eruptions. That was the word they kept on using, was eruptions, every 3 to 5 years. They don't really know why, but it was kind of associated with warm winters and early spring rains that would result in eruptions, population eruptions. I wonder, the year that you lost a lot of trees, was that preceded by warm winters?
Well, if I did a better job journaling, I would know that. I do know that it was a winter that we did have snow on the ground for a lot of the winter, which is unlike this winter. It was not till the spring. You could see just the teeth marks. We knew it was rodent under the snow line. It had been buried under the snow. It wasn't until the spring that we noticed after that snow melted off. We're like, oh no, our trees are girdled. Looking back now, I'm like, well, it would have been easy to just put on a tree protector, like a corrugated yard. At the same time, though, if there's any way in, those voles love those spaces. If they can get inside of those, they're like, that's the perfect habitat inside of what tree.
Like the plastic ones or the
Yeah.
paper ones, those are probably not going to be your thing. Some of the recommendations that I read were like, if you're going to do that, you have to bury them.
I've heard that too. And I have been with a friend here who is growing different fruit trees in different places right now. And she would check her collars like once a week, making sure they are fully in contact with the ground. There's no space to get in up under them. Because as soon as like a little hole develops, then of course the animal's going to go in there and be like, I have a new home. It's like a sheltered, out of the wind place right up cozy next to a tree trunk that they could nibble into.
Maybe it would make sense for 1 or 2 trees, but you couldn't do it on a large scale.
Well, if we were serious growers and we wanted to bury our collars around each one,
It seems like it would more likely to damage the tree somehow.
I was worried about what if that tree grows into the collar and you can't even take off the collar anymore. I think this is why my friend just religiously once a week was checking every single one of her collars at all these different farms, throughout the area. It was almost like a sort of investigation sleuthing. It's like, do we see any plastic on the ground? Because they're going to be under that plastic. Do we see any rodent trails like leading out from under the plastic? And how close are they to the trees?
Well, the recommendation from the Montana Voles of Montana guide, and they say voles can be excluded from unwanted areas by installing 1/4-inch hardware cloth at least 6 inches below the ground.
6 inches.
I know, that's really deep.
Well, that's going to mess with, how do you bury that without messing up your roots of the tree?
Exactly. I think what they were saying is like if you had a garden space that you wanted to keep voles out of the whole space, but they also recommend having a little lip at the top, like bend it out at the top so that it prevents them from gaining a toehold, is what it said.
It's like razor wire around a prison or something like that. So you can't like climb up.
All right. So the grip, Casey, I found only one example of people actually testing this. And it is our brave hero, Gary Whitmer. This is so cute. I'm just going to take some time explaining how they did this because it may or may not be appropriate for making assumptions about what's going on in real life because they created these colonies inside. They were like big, huge tubs, like 2 meters wide tubs that they filled with soil. They made like these little tiny habitats for the voles and they made little colonies. Like they had 6 or 8 colonies in the lab. These little families of voles felt comfortable there. That was how they tested some of these repellents. They put in the center of these arenas apple chunks on a stake.
Okay.
So they know that the voles feel very comfortable in there. They have this stick with a chunk of apple at the top of it. That's very attractive to them. The success or failure of any of the things that they were trying were based on whether or not the apple chunks were removed. They'd set up an apple chunk, they'd set up the treatments, they'd come back and see if the apple chunk was there. And they did this at 24 hours and 96 hours, so 4 days later, to see how well these things worked. They were looking at putrescent eggs, capsaicin, blood meal, coyote urine, something I never heard of called quebrancho, which I guess is from a tree out west that I've never heard of.
So they're putting the chemical right onto the apple or the stake leading up? Okay.
Yeah.
To the apple. Gotcha.
They also did some additional studies where they were putting stuff on the stake and measuring how much the stake had been gnawed. There's a comment in this. Effective repellents usually work through one of 3 mechanisms: eliciting pain, causing illness, or provoking fear, which made me go, oh. But what they're talking about, eliciting pain, they're talking about capsaicin. So like spicy pepper. Causing illness, they were talking about a pesticide called thiram. And so like that makes them sick and they go away. And then provoking fear is the coyote pee.
Oh, okay.
They found some repellency, but for the most part, it only lasted 24 hours and that repellent effect went away by 4 days. These things, they do something, but you'd have to apply them like every day and then they might habituate to it.
Gotcha. It was like the 24 and then the 92 hours. Different trials. Gotcha.
They said in our tactile barrier, which is the sand and acrylic paint, there was not a significant difference in the reduction of the stick gnawing.
Hmm.
They noted that another researcher found some tactile repellents reduced tree bole gnawing by beaver in a
Okay.
different study.
Alrighty.
So there's something going on there.
Yeah, I just know if I were a vole, what would I do? I'm chewing on a gritty, sandy sort of surface it's a sensory sort of just ickiness
Right.
that I wouldn't probably want to do anymore.
100%. And that's why this study maybe isn't the best stand-in for what you're talking about, because in your orchard, they could go find another tree to gnaw on. Whereas in this situation, all they really have is a stake with an apple chunk at the top of it.
Yeah,
So,
figure with one steak, no matter what you do, you're gonna have some gnaw marks in there. Be like, oh, I hated that, but they still tried it.
right. You gotta gnaw.
You gotta gnaw.
I mean,
You're gonna have gnaw marks no matter what for any of those things. It's like, oh, my mouth is burning. I'm not gonna gnaw anymore.
right.
Say though, we have had experience using capsaicin. It was just like ground up chili peppers, like in a paste around the trunk to keep it from being gnawed on, made the tree so sad. Maybe they were too young and the trees were just sensitive to capsaicin. All of a sudden, it's like the tops were not happy. Because of capsaicin on these like baby fig trees.
Never even thought about that because, wow, the only thing I've ever read about capsaicin, folks were trialing it with actual products. So there would have been an application rate where they would have tested for phytotoxicity. I don't know about, were you doing like a home?
It was just like a home
Yeah.
ground up chili paste around the trunk. Probably more sensitive than like a more established older tree. You could even tell just like it would brown up where that capsaicin was applied onto the green bark. We're like, uh-oh. Oops. There were no gnaw marks. So it worked for that. But I think we even killed some trees that way, and they were less vigorous for the whole rest of their life because of chemical girdling.
Oopsie doodle.
Oopsie.
Oopsie.
But I mean, this is oopsie. I think one of the best controls that we've had for rodents is having a house cat. Having a cat outside and just the smell of there being a cat there. We rarely will see any rodents running around. They're not that they're not there. And the cat does go out and hunts, and that's like his favorite activity. And he's a great mouser. I think the voles do sense that there is a cat around, so they better be on the DL, whatever they're doing.
Fear. Actually, Casey, there are some entomologists that study fear ecology, and they found that even some insect pests do a little bit less damage if there are predators around, and that's based on the smell.
We did that for our tree experiment this year, and I've told you about we've planted a bunch of ponderosa seedlings. We wanted to protect their terminal bud because we've had problems with deer nipping them off. But this year we put index cards and just folded them over and stapled on an index card over their terminal bud, which has been working great. Let's do an experiment with fear-inducing smells. Pee. It was human pee. And we're trying to deter deer. And it's not female human pee. It is male human pee. But I think for it to work, you'd have to go out there every time it ever rains after to pee on them again. They haven't been peed on enough, I don't think.
I mean, to make a determination, like, of course, you're talking about deer, but with this vole work, you'd have to do it every day.
Yeah, and that's a lot of pee.
Or comparing it to the work that your cat has been doing to pay its rent, it would have to be kind of random, right? Because like the animals would habituate to the smell of it.
Exactly, yeah. You just have to like pee spray different spot. Like you never know where you're going to be next. That's part of the fear too, is like it could be anywhere. It's not going to be in that one spot right by the trunk of the tree every time.
How does that work out? Is that a sustainable approach?
So turns out this year has been just very mild, not too much snow on the ground. There's been green grass like all winter. So the deer haven't been messing with any terminal buds of anything, whether it has a index card bud cap or not. So none of the index cards, except for one, looks like it got nibbled on just incidentally. Probably a deer was trying to get some grass next to this index card and it had just a couple nibbles on it, but the bud was fine. So far, my experience with the index card bud caps has been like 100% successful, but only in this year that has been so mild and the grass is coming out everywhere.
The pest pressure was not very high.
There was not much pressure. So anyway, I'm going to try it again next year and probably for the next couple of years. So far, 100% success. So let's keep going.
I do have a question for you. Not to like spoiler alert your orchard, but I was thinking about extension people like Becky Seidman, my mentor and my influence on a lot of educational things. Like I saw her field a question about this really gracefully. Somebody came up to her and said, we just bought a house. There's an old orchard in it, which is really common here in New Hampshire because they'll tear down farmhouses and like build a bunch of houses where there's apple orchards. And so people are like, oh, like let's grow apples, like we'll donate them or whatever. And they find out how hard it is to maintain apples. They spend a lot of money and they go through all of this. And then they kind of go, you know what, we're just going to buy apples from the farmer down the street who really like is an expert in it. What do you wish you knew before you started growing apples now that you have done it?
Yeah, exactly what you just said is happening here too, because, well, first off, our plat, like subdivision where our property is, it's called Como Orchards. This was an orchard back in, it was like the 1920s, 30s, 40s. And it was apple boom and people came staking claim so that they could grow apples and it was going to be like gold. And the reason that they grew apples here is because they were so new. There hadn't been time for apple pests come to the valley yet. So many people came. Actually, a lot of people didn't come, just sight unseen, had someone stake their apple orchard like claim.
Wait, when was this?
I believe it was like the 1920s, 1930s, 1940s. That was it. And then by the 1940s, it was over because the apple pest had moved in. It turns out fire blight is like the big problem here. That was discovered pretty much right away.
To be honest, Casey, it probably was there. People just didn't know about it because it's one of those things that it can live in wild hosts. Like all the rosaceae trees out there were probably harboring it.
So there are just a lot of apple trees still here. And like I said, Macintosh, 99% of them. Yeah, they are still just, in the woods, on the hills, in the pastures all around here. So there's not any shortage of apples. A lot of these trees, are getting to be like 100 years old now, 80 to 100 years old. We think the ones on our property, and they are getting older now and starting to decline, which actually just means more apples. It means more because the apples think they're dying. The trees think they're dying. So they're going to have a huge bumper crop. And it's like, well, we're back next year. Oh, but we're dying. Tons of apples. Like they want to make tons of apples because they think they're dying. But anyway, yeah. So turns out we already had apples here. But when we first moved in, we're like, let's plant an orchard. If we would have just stuck with the apples we had, which is plenty, like we don't really need more apples than that. Also, the other thing, and we found out after we planted these apples, because we were like, well, that's going to be our big crop, and we're going to sell apples at the farmer's market. Well, first off, everyone has apples here, because there's Macintosh apples all around. And then second off, there's kind of like this monopoly on selling the apples in Ravalli County, in the Bitterroot Valley, because there is, and it's one of the biggest festivals of the whole county, and it's called Apple Days. It's a special farmers market where a lot more people come out. It's like an all-day thing. And then there's apple cider at night. So it's apple days. And then there's liquid apple night. It's a whole thing. Yeah. But you can't even sell apples there. You can sell everything but apples. And the only people who can sell apples is if it benefits the Ravalli County Museum, who is the one who puts on this event. We didn't know any of this when we were planting the apples. We were like, we're going to get rich on apples, just like those people from the 1920s who came in and planted a bunch of apples. And then after a couple of years left because it didn't turn out to be like the payday they thought. I'm glad that we did because we've learned a lot. We spent a lot of money and we lost a lot of money on our apples, put it in our trees. They were about 3 to 5 years old. We got very few apples on them because we had been blossoming so that they could grow bigger instead of producing apples the first couple of years. And then it was going to be the year they were going to start our first crop of apples. This is when they got girdled. A lot of them. So many of them did. Also, we had been training them to like grow high density style. in rows. And then all of a sudden, we decided we needed to take out these girdled ones, and we had big gaps in our rows. And we're like, let's grow them out like trees now. But the way we had already pruned them by the seat of our pants, just like decide we need to retrain these to grow as trees now. And that's kind of what we're doing. And we still have maybe like 1/10 of the original trees that we planted are still out there. It's hard now. Some of them kind of have like crooked trunks a little bit, or just like big scars from where we had pruned off their lateral branches.
But now they're more like pets.
Now they are more like pets. I'm just trying to really keep them alive. But the biggest problem, I guess, trying to train them into trees after having grown them with big lateral branches to grow sideways in this row sort of system, is that then we had to cut off like pretty large sized branches. They're healing, but it's definitely a weak spot in the trunk of the tree at this point. We've learned many lessons. We wanted to be organic apple growers. Well, that's almost impossible. There's the Holistic Orchard book by Michael Phillips, has a ton of tips, but fire blight is one of the biggest problems here. And it just every spring when the apples are blossoming, if it rains and if it stays moist, you will have fire blight. We were like, we never want to spray, but you have to if you don't want to have a problem with fire blight. There's scab too, and then there's rust. I don't know. Would it make it more susceptible to then have scab and rust on your actual apples if the tree was already like affected by fire blight? I wonder.
Probably not, because like if you're just worried about like the cosmetic symptoms of scab or russeting, like those are probably just two things that are happening concurrently, because you have a lot of inoculum in your environment. Like you said, like if you had all those historic trees, those historic trees have figured out a way to defend themselves. Like they haven't been killed by a fire blade. Like they might be carriers of it, but like they're surviving it.
Yeah, exactly. Because all of the Macintoshes that came on our property, we've pruned them a few times, but that's it. We've never sprayed anything like that. They're old established trees. They have better apples than we have on this orchard that we spent so much time on.
Right. So I think it's like totally human nature for anybody to be like, there's apples everywhere. Like, why would there be a problem with me planting these apples? Like, why wouldn't they be able to defend themselves? But like, they're domestic animals. You wouldn't just throw your cows out into the forest and be like, figure it out. I know there's predators out there, but like, you're a wild animal, right?
Right. No, not really. It's like we ordered these trees from Nebraska, Bitterroot, to stick in our cold, clayey soil. And then, so another thing that we did when we were planting these apple trees is there was one older Macintosh right where we wanted to plant this orchard. It was kind of in the way of where we wanted to drive the tractor. So we're like, let's cut this one tree down, plant 75 trees right where this one tree was. I can't remember if you're the one who told me this, but something about if you kill a tree and then plant new trees there, those new trees will know that a old tree was there and died, and they will not be happy about that.
That doesn't sound like something I would say.
Somebody, I don't know if it was the Holistic Orchard book again. It's been a couple of years since I've read it through, but I was like, oh no, we just killed a tree and now we're planting baby trees where this tree was killed. They're going to know.
I mean, they would know if the disease was like a root-borne problem, right? So like this is something we do talk about. There's like a couple peach tree diseases that like the inoculum does live in the soil, so you would not be able to plant back in that area. But fire blight, that's not an issue. I don't think there's any apple diseases, or there might be some viruses, but I don't think you had virus problems.
What we're doing now with our orchard is we have trained out these couple of remaining trees that didn't get girdled are still really healthy. We're pruning them to like grow tall tree form. We're going to plant every maybe year. I'm getting into planting more trees. I just ordered this week 3 pear trees to throw in the mix or near these other trees. And they're going to be spaced out, not in rows or anything like that. But we have a good big area to spread them all out. They are semi-dwarf, these pear trees, on like rootstock that supposedly will do good here. But anyway, that's my new goal, is that now I would just want to diversify that orchard and every year plant like 3 more different kind of trees in there.
Another thing that's changed is like your attitude about it is it's different than when you're a commercial farmer. Like you're just putting out a bunch of stuff that brings you joy and happiness. And if it survives, it means it did well there. And if it doesn't, oh well, right?
Well, exactly. Now it's only 3 trees. instead of 75.
Right.
If one goes, you still have 2. It's all good. And then I can just try again later. So yeah, there's no pressure now. Now it's just more for fun.
All right, I will leave it there. Although this is not the last you will hear about tree fruit diseases, fire blight is a very ubiquitous problem. It will impact apples, pears, all of the Rosaceae. So you'll hear more from us about that. Make sure to find photos of what we discussed on our Instagram at Serious Grower. Serious Grower Podcast is a production of New Hampshire Community Supported Research. If you are interested in becoming a co-host or would like to learn more about our mission to democratize agricultural research, visit our website at nhcsr.org or come over to our YouTube channel at NHCSR, where we're sharing insights from the agricultural research community, and we'll be vlogging about our research efforts on the farm. You can support this work by liking and subscribing, and even better, consider joining our Patreon community.